Spring is here and baseball is back.
You can't forget the Derby. I love the hats. Do you have yours yet?
My hat? I treated myself to a whole outfit.
If you want to be able to treat yourself, then you should check out the Nest Savings Account at LGE Community Credit Union, where they want you to reach your savings goals faster.
Take it from a pair of 680 The Fan wives. Head to lgeccu.org to find out what makes their team #1 in Georgia.
Welcome everyone to the Janelle King Show. I am Janelle King and this is Extra 106.3, and this is where we discuss kitchen table topics that are typically banned from family gatherings but are absolutely necessary in order to have a strong republic. You can catch this show on the radio every Saturday at 4 p.m. and every Sunday at 9 a.m. for an encore episode. And then our podcast drops every single Tuesday, and you can listen to that on the podcast part right here with Extra 106.3 or wherever you get your podcast. I do have a special announcement though. We are changing our time. We will be airing at 3 p.m. on Saturdays starting next week. That's April 27th. We'll be at 3 p.m. And the reason why is very simple. Some of the other shows that come on before me are more political, and then the show right before me is more business friendly. So they decided to swap us so that I will be a part of the political lineup, which I think is smart. It's so smart. So 3 p.m., get that in your head so that you are not waiting on me at 4. Because what you will get is the Marketing Mad Men, which typically airs right before me. So starting next Saturday, the show will air at 3 p.m. and the encore episode will still air on Sundays at 9 a.m. and podcasts and everything else will still stay the same. I also have a YouTube page. Let me tell you something. I dropped the YouTube page a week ago and I put all of my podcasts up there, and then I'm starting to put the video option in the full interviews of our candidate conversations, and I find it quite interesting that within a short period of time, we've already had over 1,000 views, and I thought that was fantastic. However, subscribers are still a little low, so if you're listening, please, it costs absolutely nothing to support the page, which supports me. So if you can go to my YouTube page, The Janelle King Show, and hit subscribe, that would be absolutely fantastic. So this week, I am introducing you to a new candidate. Last week, you heard a snippet of the interview I did with attorney Robert Patillo, who is running against Judge McAfee, who is the judge who was overseeing the Fonnie Willis situation. And so now Robert is challenging him, but he likes to say that he's not challenging him. They're just running for the same seat. However you want to look at it, they're in a competition. That being said, we had a fabulous conversation, and you can go watch that full interview on my YouTube page, and then the snippet of it is on the previous podcast. But this week, I'm introducing you to my dear friend, Representative Lauren Daniel. Other than being so awesome and fantastic, being the youngest Republican female in the House, in the Georgia House, being a mother of 4 children, and she's 29 years old and she's married. And so I had a lot of questions, but we were able to have a great discussion. But before I share a bit about her background, I want to tell you why I'm doing this, as well as what I'm doing, because I think that it's important to keep everyone in the loop, especially you all. So first, what am I doing? I'm doing candidate conversations, but I have an emphasis on candid, because it's more of like candid conversations with candidates. And what we're doing is we're highlighting people who are elected as well as those who are on the trail. But most importantly, I'm introducing you to elected officials who you may not have heard a lot about. You maybe have an idea of who they are, or maybe you've never heard of them at all. But most importantly, you have no clue in most cases what they do. Those such as many of our House and Senate, Georgia House and Senate elected officials, who at the time of this interview, they were in session. I think we all know that they go into session for a couple of months. But did you know that at the end of this session, they pass over 1,000 new policies, new laws that you have to abide by every single year? How many can you name? I wonder. My guess is no more than one or two, and those are the bills or the policies that are being talked about mostly in the media. What about our public service commissioner? Because there is an interview that's coming up with one of our public service commissioners. I bet you didn't know that you could call their office if you're having issues with your light bill, or even if you're struggling to pay. Most people don't know. This is why I am doing this. Because in my heart of hearts, I believe that there are too many people who walk into the booth on election day, and you go in there with your mindset on the individual that you plan on supporting. You have your mindset on the presidential, the governor, the lieutenant governor, the big offices that we all tend to pay attention to the most. But then you go in there and you vote for those people, but then the remaining 8 to 10 that are on there are just uneducated guests. You're kind of going any, mini, miny, mo, or this person looks like this. Their name sounds ethnic. People that do that. Or, oh, this sounds like a female. Maybe we should do that. There's so many weird things that we all go through in order to choose who we plan to support. And I really get nervous about that. And this is why I'm doing this. As a country, we haven't become the superpower that we are on a global stage by ourselves. We did this as a people, but is exactly how we find ourselves under authoritarianism when we go in there and we just randomly pick people because we don't know who we're voting for. It's when we the people, us, feel like we've been neglected by our leaders, so we kind of lose our excitement. We have apathy whenever it's time to go vote. Like I said, we're uneducated about who we're voting for, why we're voting for them, what they do, or how it's going to impact me. And when we have leaders that are currently in office who stop talking to the people, we now then find ourselves uniting around a handful of individuals that we believe are looking out for us, that we feel are hear us or hear our plight. And in doing so, that results in us having an authority who directs us towards the person or the party that we should vote for, that we should support, rather than making decisions on our own. What do I mean by that? I mean, how many times have you called up a friend or phoned a friend to say, hey, who are you voting for such and such? Now, I'm not against that. I have several people who do that with me, and I love it because it leads to conversations about why I'm supporting the person I'm supporting or not supporting the person I'm supporting. I don't often share exactly who I'm voting for because I'm aware of my platform and I don't want it to come off as if I'm endorsing. But then there are times when I do endorse. There are times when I feel like this is too important and not for me not to share why I'm supporting this person. Either way, getting that information is great, but what are you getting it for? Are you getting that information because you're going to now walk out and go do research, or are you getting this information because you've now determined who you're going to support because that's who your girlfriend or your guy friend or whoever said that you should support? Let's not continue to leave this highly important, highly critical decision up to others, our neighbors, or even the media. Let's do the work ourselves. That being said, today, you will hear a portion of an interview I conducted with State Representative Lauren Daniel. Now, Representative Daniel represents the State House District 81, which happens to be a predominantly, it's really interesting. I think even though she's representing it, and I know that she identifies as Republican, but she is most certainly someone who works across the aisle. Even though that's happening, she is in an area that is not a strong Republican area. So having a Republican represent an area that's not highly red is extremely intriguing to me. So I was excited to sit down with her. And besides her being a personal friend of mine, she is in Henry County and she's a Henry County native. She is engaged in so many different local charities. She runs one called Kindness Works, which is a program that is in the Henry County schools. She also serves on the executive board for the Bridge Wellness South Pregnancy Resource Center. And she's devoted to fighting for families under the Gold Dome, which is our state house. Or, well, it's our state capital. But as the representative of House District 81, she embodies the spirit of never giving up, and she fosters positive change. She was a young mom, and they figured it out together, and it's so fabulous to see what their family is today. So after the break, you're going to meet Representative Lauren Daniel and hear a bit of our discussion. We're going to go into her background a little bit. And then over the course of the full interview, now I know you're only going to get a portion, but the full interview will have a little bit of her background, her legislative focus, some of her current affairs, some of her political challenges, stuff like that. And then we do play a fun game of Would You Rather. I really like to do that. I'm changing up the questions over the course of the interview, so that's going to be fun. So after the break, like I said, you're going to hear a portion of the interview. And if you would like to hear the full interview, head over to the Janelle King Show YouTube page for the final, to hear all of it. And in the final segment of this show, I am going to share my thoughts on what you can expect when you listen to the full interview as a whole. So stay tuned. Get ready. Get your pen and paper out. You're listening to the Janelle King Show. This is Extra 106.3. We'll be right back. Welcome to the Janelle King Show. I am Janelle King, and you're listening to Extra 106.3. If you're listening on the radio on a Saturday at 4 p.m. or encore episode at 9 a.m. But if you're watching on YouTube, welcome, welcome, welcome. We decided to add some video to these conversations, and we appreciate you to join. We appreciate you for joining. Oh my God. And I want you to like, share, and comment if you have something to say, as well as check out the podcast. The podcast will drop every Tuesday, and you can watch on the podcast park or listen on the podcast park, or you can listen anywhere where you get your podcast. So we are everywhere. Okay. So thank you so much for joining. This is part of my candid conversations, however you want to put it. And we're highlighting people in conversations under the Georgia Legislative Dome. And this is great. You know, we got so much going on. And I think that a lot of times we get caught up in national politics. We don't pay attention to local and people that represent who we are. So I am here to introduce individuals that are doing things, making strides, and really impacting your political space a lot more than you think. So right now, we have Representative Lauren Daniel with us, and I'm so excited to have her. Hi, Lauren.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Now, like I said, I gave a brief background, but I want you to kind of go into your upbringing a little bit and just kind of give people who you are outside of the political space.
I always love these conversations because I think a lot of times politicians or public, I like to call us public servants, not politicians. But you know, sometimes we're stuffy and you don't get to see who we are and why we step up to run in the first place. And so thank you for asking that. I have 4 beautiful children. I had my first child in high school, so my story is very different than most, being a teen mom and having that experience and, just overcoming that adversity. And I mean, it's taken me several years, but my husband and I, we've been together since we were in high school, and, we've kinda, been involved in local politics for the better part of, 10, 15 years here, and so local politics definitely matter, and it's fundamentally formed who we are because we've been doing it since we were, old enough to vote.
How so? What was it like? Were you just kind of knocking on doors, and what were you doing?
So I feel like God has literally laid out our entire story. So my husband was actually the youngest elected official in the state at 19. He got elected to the Hampton City Council, which is, a small elected office, but nonetheless, he was 19 and it was a big deal at the time. And we've just had a passion for our local people and trying to help. But I think him getting into that so early, we were obviously knocking doors and campaigning for him. But then, it introduced us to a world of local politics, our local state reps and our senators and, really what they do. And so there was a natural flow there to jump on their campaigns and try and, help them get elected and reelected over the years. And, it's a natural progression.
Perfect, perfect. Now, I know that you are a Republican in the state house and wanted to find out what was your political journey or any milestones or key events that shaped your political beliefs.
Yeah, so I think that's an interesting question on how our political beliefs are formed. Uh, I think, I mean, I think it's really just common sense. Like, I think you look at the left today, and there's just things that I fundamentally don't agree with. But when you think about, I, I don't know, I consider myself a common sense conservative. Like, what what policies are we putting in place? How are we being fiscally responsible? What are we being? Are we being? I don't know, reactionary? Are we being proactive? I think all
Yeah.
that matters. Um, but in terms of like the Republican Party and the platform, we're for opportunity, I think. And I think that's a big, you know, I actually listened to a show that you had given. I don't know if it was recently. I listened to it recently, but you did a great job explaining the differences in terms of how Republicans vote and how Democrats vote. And um, we have a tendency to vote for what is, I don't want to say good for us, but, as individuals, what do you want as
Yeah.
an individual, and what's going to help your family?
Right.
And, Democrats have a tendency to say, well, I think this might be good for everyone else.
Yeah.
But then if the majority votes for what they believe is going to be good for them and their families, your policy will be shaped by that. And
Right.
you will have that, that
Mhm.
breakdown. And so I think that's a perfect example of, you know, the
Yeah.
differences.
What's interesting? When I did that video, there was a slight part of me that felt almost like, should I not say that I'm thinking about the things that are concerning me or concerning my family? It's almost like we live in a society where they make you feel like you're doing something wrong if you are taking care of yourself. When in fact, we all know that you can't help others if you're not in a place of strength. And ultimately, if we come together and we all are voting for things and supporting policies that will directly impact us, we'll get a collective response. And so I got some good traction on that. And I hope more and more people understand where we're coming from when we say to focus in on those things that directly impact you. And that being said, you're working on legislation every single day. As we're recording this right now, Representative Daniel is in session. So we are great and we're grateful that she's able to kind of pull away. So can you share what are some insights or policy perspectives that you're working on or that is going on in the Dome as we speak?
Yeah, so I came in, I'm the youngest female on the Republican side, and I think that brings with it an an untapped market, if you will,
Yes.
especially when it comes to families. Like,
Yeah.
If you are not in the child rearing stage of your life, it's very difficult to understand what families are dealing with in today's society. And so I've tried to bring that perspective, if you will, with me up there. And I passed 1021, which is a increase in the child tax deduction. It took it from 3,000 to 4,000, and so that will be for every child in the state. And I think that's going to help families tremendously. We tried to focus on families this year. Maternal and infant health is also a huge topic that I have focused on and will continue to focus on this year. I dropped 3 pieces of legislation on that. It was 1036, 37, and 38. It was like a bundle. And the maternal mortality issue is a big deal in Georgia. We know that. And infant mortality is not far behind it. And so, dealing with those things, I think, super important. And as Republicans and as somebody who's pro-life, I think it's hand in hand. And so I've really focused in on families this year. We've also passed, lowering the income tax rate, and we're trying to get it down. But do it in a responsible way. And that's a lot of people don't understand how the tax system works in Georgia, but we do have a constitutional requirement for a balanced budget. And so, would I like to get rid of the income tax? Sure. But how do we do that in a responsible way? And I think the governor has led in a great way on that. And we have continuously, year after year, continued to lower it, trying to get it as low as possible. So school choice is another big one. Some of the, like 233, that's the school vouchers that everybody, talks about in the news, but we've also pushed other things regarding school choice and different scholarships. And, they're not all flashy, but I think ultimately, I personally would love to see universal school choice, something similar to how Florida operates. It's just overwhelmingly, whether you're Republican or Democrat, the polling has been done, and parents want to be able to make that choice for their kids. And so those are some issues, they all kind of have an underlying family tinge to them, I would say. Because we all come up there with different backgrounds, with different strengths. And I think that is where I can shine at the moment.
What I love about where you are and what you're working on? I love that it's family focused. And most importantly, I love that you're a woman focusing on the family. A lot of times, particularly in politics, it's such a male dominated industry. And it's almost like, I feel like the women want to shy away from some of these lanes that we typically get thrown into simply because we're a woman. And I don't like that. I feel like if that's your strength and you understand it on a deep level, then you should put your energy and time behind that. And you should probably be more successful, which is what you're doing. And I just love that. Can we talk a little bit about the maternal mortality? Because this is a topic that I feel has been a little hijacked from the left side. And the way I hear, and this is not to create a partisan battle or anything like that, because I think that there's conversations that have to happen on both sides. I don't think either has it all the way right when it comes to this. However, I hear it mostly on the left. So what is your message as it relates to maternal mortality compared to theirs? Because they typically talk about minorities and they keep the focus on diverse communities. But this is something that I think crosses across the board, correct?
It does. And so when I talk about maternal mortality, I hate when it's referred to as a bipartisan effort, because I feel like it should be a nonpartisan effort. And those are two different things. Small difference, but huge impact in terms of how we see it. And, earlier this session, I actually got up in the well and just directly affronted, we had Democrat reps get up there, and they were continuously, citing different statistics that did not necessarily align. They weren't accurate. And, I always try to explain to people, the Maternal Review Committee is a great thing, but what Republicans actually put it in place about 12 years ago. And just about every piece of legislation over the last decade that has been passed and put into place on this issue has been led by Republicans. And so getting people to understand that, I think, has been difficult because the messaging machine on the left is great. I mean, I'll give it to them. They're good at it.
Right.
But that doesn't change the facts. And so as somebody, I also had, terrible complications in my recent pregnancy. And so it is somewhat personal to me. Like, I recognize, if we're going to make it partisan, you're not helping anyone.
Yeah.
And so I got up in the well and basically just said that out loud and said, this is not a partisan issue. Quit making it one.
Yeah.
Because I mean, to answer your question, I think, on the left with this issue, they always turn back to Medicaid expansion. But my question is, does that prevent you from getting preeclampsia? Does that prevent you from having an embolism? Does that prevent you from having postpartum depression? The answer to that is no. Republicans actually expanded pregnancy Medicaid and to up to a year. And so that's already in place. Like, that's, as Republicans and people that are pro-life, we felt like that was the right thing to do. But it's interesting because no one ever talks about the efforts that have been made. And
Right.
we'll see.
We have to. We got to see, but we have to show that. I didn't know that either. Everything you were just saying, I hadn't heard it. I didn't know. It almost felt like Republicans just wasn't talking about this at all, but you were passing policy.
Yes.
So the current policy you're working on, can you talk a little bit about that? And how do you, like, what policy can you associate to this particular issue that will have an effect? Because it almost feels like when it comes to your health, it's every person is so different that it's hard to create a policy that kind of encompasses everyone.
Yeah, so the three bills, and they're all maternal health related, but they touch on different aspects, is how I like to describe it. So the first made it through the House with 100% support, which is great. And what it did is it's going to create a maternal and infant health commission in the state. We have the review committee. So in order for me to explain this accurately, I'll have to explain what the review committee does. And so the Maternal Mortality Review Committee takes all of the medical records of the women who have died from either in pregnancy or up to a year after they give birth for any reason. Okay, so when we talk about the numbers in that report, it is important to differentiate because there are pregnancy-related deaths. So those are your things that are directly related to pregnancy or giving birth. And then there are pregnancy-associated deaths because these people gave birth, but that includes motor vehicle accidents, homicide, any reason. Okay, so when we're talking about the statistics, it's very important not to group those two together because they are different. Is it health related or is it just because I had a child within last year. If I got in an accident, God forbid, I would be counted. And
really?
Yes. And so when we talk about that report, we have to talk about it transparently. Now they've done wonderful things in terms of health and, trying to compile information. But with that being said, we are only looking at the women who have died. And there are much, much more women who have had complications and have gotten very sick that survive, and their stories are not looked at in that review committee, essentially. And so this commission would seek to bring policymakers to the table because policymakers currently don't sit on the review committee either. So that is a substantial difference. That review committee it deals with medical records, so it is confidential in nature. So I understand that is that's intentional, but the
Are
commission,
they doctors that sit on there?
Yeah.
Like, okay.
Yes, and so it's a long list. It's
okay.
Several doctors, several research institutions like Emory Morehouse, the academics are on there. Different advocacy groups are on there. So it's a conglomeration of people with different backgrounds.
Okay.
So the commission is different in that sense. It would seek to put policymakers at the table and it would be open to the public. So the way our commissions work is our meetings and stuff happen where Georgians, we go around the state and Georgians come in and talk about it. And so I think, this kind of goes back to the view of the majority in the legislature are men. It's no secret. And so getting policymakers to understand what people are dealing with, I think, is vitally important. And making sure people feel heard. And so just like you said, I didn't know that Republicans have been working on this. They definitely have, and for over a decade, but it's not something that has been, used as a messaging tool. And so to see that on the left is concerning and interesting, but we do have to do a better job to make sure that people know and women know that we're trying to help them. But the commission itself also encompasses infants.
Okay.
And that is not something that the Maternal Mortality Review Committee looks at. The most recent, when I pulled it up on DPH's website the other day, the most recent infant mortality report was like 2017. So I don't know, I'm sure DPH keeps up with it, but there's not, there's not a report or a committee, to my knowledge, that is over it. And so bringing policymakers to kind of get all of that encompassed, I think, is an exciting thing. And so it did pass out of the House. It's over on the Senate side. And so that's something I'll keep working on to make sure it comes to fruition. But
and the specific policy would be what?
So the purpose of the commission actually is it has a sunset clause after 2 years. And so it would give us the ability to travel around the state, figure out, because similar to what you were talking about, different people have different experiences, different needs. Georgia is a really diverse state. It's also has different regions that need different things. So like, rural Georgia is very different than the metro. And so they need different things. And so trying to figure out how to best make policy. And so the purpose of the commission is actually to put the people in the room that have the ability to make policy, to take all the information we're given, all the statistics we're given on this issue, and say, okay, this is what we can do going forward to touch individualized issues. So I always give the example, when I gave birth last summer, I represent Henry County. We have somewhere over 250,000 people, and we have 12 birthing rooms in our hospital. And so it's, after talking to OBs and nurses there, it's not uncommon for women to end up giving birth in the ER or in the hallway because there's just not capacity. And so, again, that's something that a review committee wouldn't pick up on because you're not looking at the experiences. But how many birthing rooms does the hospital have? Do they have, all that plays into someone's outcome.
I love that you have, like when you mentioned the birthing rooms, because that's what I was looking for, is something that, so let's start here. When you mentioned it, what came to mind was, if I'm giving birth in an emergency room, or if I'm giving birth in the hallway, that could open me up to infections, just all kinds of things, because you're exposed, the baby's exposed, and it's just not the most conducive environment. And I'm not a doctor, so this is all assumption and speculation, but fixing something like that is something that I don't think people consider or even think that can play a role in helping to reduce some of those numbers. So when we look at the women that are being affected, one of the messaging I hear a lot is that Black women are disproportionately affected as it relates to maternal mortality. Is that what you're seeing in the commission, or is that something that's a little inflated, or how are you seeing it as it relates to the ethnic breakdown?
Yeah, so it is a little inflated, and that's but it does disproportionately affect Black women. And so it's yes and no. And that goes back to how many deaths are counted, what deaths are counted. So if you include the pregnancy associated deaths, so your motor vehicle accidents, your homicide, your domestic violence, if you include those numbers, then you get an inflated number. Now, if you only take the health disparities, now that's about I want to say the last time I looked at it, it affects Black women about 2.3% higher than other, other races. Now, a lot of the information that has been brought forth by medical providers and stuff is that there are risk factors, and a lot of them are, obesity, high blood pressure. A lot of these are pre-existing conditions that people come in with. And so, having that, how do you affect policy? You have to put in place things that will help them be healthier, nutrition.
Yes.
You're listening to the Janelle King Show. This is Extra 106.3. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Janelle King Show. I am Janelle King. This is Extra 106.3. Thank you for listening to that snippet of my candid conversation with Representative Lauren Daniel. If you are joining us for the first time today or ever, don't worry. You will have the opportunity to catch the full episode by going to the Janelle King Show on the YouTube page right now. Please remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe when you get over there, as all of that helps me to continue to produce all of this content for you and to keep having these conversations and then to do it on camera. That's the fun part. If you don't want to miss the next conversation, which will be with Indiana State Senate candidate Philip Clay. I know you're like, Indiana? Yep. It's really interesting. It's going to be a good conversation. He's actually a Black conservative. So I thought that was fascinating, especially coming out of Indiana. But his story is pretty cool. If you don't want to miss that conversation, please feel free to go over there and hit the notification button, which is that little bell that you'll see on the page. So you'll be notified when that drops. Now, if you missed the first half of this show, as a quick recap, I spoke with Georgia State Rep. Lauren Daniel, who is the youngest female Republican right now under our Georgia Dome. We discussed her legislative insights, and at the time of the interview, like I stated earlier, session was in progress. So we discussed a topic that was pretty dear to my heart, because I keep getting inundated as a Black woman with this data that is showing that Black women are being disproportionately impacted by maternal mortality. It's a narrative that I believe is really driving a lot of fear amongst my community of Black women as it relates to giving birth, and that it would be much more dangerous for me because I am a woman of color rather than a woman who is non-African American. So we went into that, and during the discussion, we discussed the impact of maternal mortality on Black women, and we highlighted some of the statistics, whether they're inflated or not, as well as some of the underlying health issues that have contributed to some of these numbers. And I thought that was a really, really good conversation. Something else that we did was Representative Daniel provided some insight into legislative efforts to address maternal health. And this is some of the stuff that you'll get more of as we move into the full interview. So some of this you may not have heard in the snippet, but I want to give you a little bit of what's happening in the full interview so that you'll know what to expect. So like I said, she gave some insight on legislative efforts as well as addressing the maternal health issue that I mentioned. She also discussed a commission that was created and policies that are being put in place that will aim towards improving overall health outcomes for women as a whole. She is very much so a elected official who cares about families and family dynamics. And I think as we get older, but as our elected officials get younger, because I do feel like there is a shifting that's happening because people are just getting older. But as that's happening, I do think that the focus in on the needs of families and children and things of that nature is going to become more and more of a priority for our elected officials, because our electorate as a whole is a little bit younger, is getting younger, and we're moving into the space where we are discussing more issues that are impacting younger people. So I think it's interesting to have someone there who is of that generation because she can speak to it in a very unique way. We also touched on some of the complexities around post-birth complications and how it attributes to childbirth as a whole. So listening to the full discussion, you'll also get a little bit of our conversation on national politics, where we were discussing immigration policies and some of the local initiatives that are in place to address sanctuary cities. And let me tell you, Lauren gave me a perspective on the sanctuary cities and how it affects the value of your home and your community. It's quite interesting. So make sure you go and listen to that. I thought that was really cool. And we also talked about some of the bipartisan efforts that she is currently working on, which I also found to be pretty fascinating. And just, here's the thing, right? Particularly when it comes to illegal immigration, because that's one of the topics that she also discussed, as I mentioned, the sanctuary cities. But there are some plans that are on the state level that they're putting in place to help address this. And I'm interested to know what your thoughts are. But she listed off a number of bills that she was currently working on. And I find it pretty fascinating. She is also the elected official who typically has her sweet baby with her, which is why I have him, baby Zane, on the image of the thumbnail when you go and watch the video, because that's also a unique dynamic as well. She explains why he's with her while she is legislating and what that's like. She just kind of touched on being a woman, but being a young woman particularly, but overall being a woman in politics that is under the dome for 4 months. Her story is quite fascinating. I'm pretty excited for you to hear more about it. As I stated in the first block, candidate conversations is something that I felt that was extremely necessary. I was listening to a book, and I'm going to tell you what that book is at a later date because I'm thinking about doing a podcast on it, and I think it's going to I'm interested. I'm just interested to see how people are going to respond. But I read a book recently that I thought was quite interesting and fascinating. In that book, there was mention of whether or not we are watching authoritarianism play out on both sides, whether it be with Biden or Trump. And I found that to be unique because we are often talking about socialism and we talk about communism a lot, but are we under authoritarianism? Because that's something that happened prior to the Holocaust and everything we know as it relates to the concentration camps and all that stuff. There were things that happened leading up to that put Hitler in a certain position, and that position was created by the people. So I think that we need to have a deeper conversation about this, and I think I am going to break down some of the interesting moments that or my take and kind of do like a little bit of a recap on this book that I read recently. I just finished it today. I don't know. I hope it strikes up some unique conversations so that we can go back to having public and private discourse. Because right now, I don't think our private discourse matches our public discourse, but that's a whole other conversation. Once again, thank you so much for listening. And until next week, stay unafraid, stay unapologetic, and always continue to seek the truth. This is the Janelle King Show, and this is Extra 106.3. Have a great week.
Spring is here and baseball is back.
You can't forget the Derby. I love the hats. Do you have yours yet?
My hat? I treated myself to a whole outfit.
If you want to be able to treat yourself, then you should check out the Nest Savings Account at LGE Community Credit Union, where they want you to reach your savings goals faster.
Take it from a pair of 680 The Fan wives. Head to lgeccu.org to find out what makes their team #1 in Georgia.
The Fan is ready for Brave season. Are you?
3-1 smoked high in the air, deep center field, and heading for the horizon. A home run by Olsen.
We're streaming every game of the Braves 2024 season free on the 680 The Fan app.
So make sure you download it now and don't miss a pitch of the Braves this season.
Hey homeowners, Southern Exteriors is your go-to for top-notch exterior services. From roofing, siding, windows, and gutters, you name it, and you get immediate service. Plus, their in-house warranty division means peace of mind for years to come. From leaky roofs to faded siding, trust Southern Exteriors for a quick, lasting transformation. Call 877-9-SOUTHERN or visit them online at southernexteriors.co. Southern Exteriors, quality and precision you can rely on for over 20 years.